my
rented a futon and people paid. They paid, I forget how much, like $40 maybe for it. Okay. If we got people
to stay on the
futon. Hi, this is Danielle and
Kyra.
And you're listening to Scrunchy-Fi, a show by mamas for mamas. Here we cover all the creative ways to make money, save money, and invest to reach financial freedom and live the life you want.
Hey, Danielle. How you doing?
Hello. Good. How are you?
Hey. Doing okay. Okay over here. So today we're going to talk about house hacking. Dun, dun, dun. For some people who don't know what house hacking is, any method that you want to use in order to reduce your housing costs and find a way to rent out a portion of your accommodation. And I mean, we're saying house hacking, but let's say you're renting an apartment, for example, and it's an apartment, let's say back in your college days, you rented out a larger apartment, 3 bedrooms, and you rented out the other 2 to your college roommates. Form of house hacking. That's probably something that we thought at the time was, okay, this is just a no-brainer. Let's live with our friends. And it helps with the rent costs. But then we kind of leave those ideas in the past and we move on with our lives and we buy into the, everyone must have the dream house. And we kind of forget about all those kind of cost-saving methods that we used back in the day in our college years. So we're here to tell you house hacking is not dead. It's full on raging with so many people out there. I think it took me a long time until I realized that my grandfather house hacks. So he owns a duplex, and this is more of a traditional house hacking method. He owns a duplex and he lives in one side and he rents out the other side of the duplex. They're, fully 2 separate housing, with their, with a firewall in the middle, their own private entrances, own bathroom, everything like that. But he owns the building, so he rents out half of it. So that's a form of house hacking.
That's definitely a form of house hacking. I think that, you're saying that's traditional, but perhaps a lot of people don't even know or think about that, right? Like when you're looking for homes, like when you go on realtor.com, et cetera, you sometimes just click, automatically single family home. I'm a single family. Why would I look for a multifamily? What even is that?
Right.
And what would I do with that? I'm just one family. Well, that's the whole thing, is that you can house hack with something that would be considered a multifamily home, or depending on your area, an ADU, an additional dwelling unit, that could be rented out. So if you have a big yard, you could actually construct an ADU and either long-term rent that out or short-term rental. But I guess we're getting way ahead of ourselves. Maybe we should define some of these, like short-term versus long-term rentals, and kind of what are people's options with house hacking. Even if, let's say, they don't own a home, can they still house hack? So let's talk about perhaps how you started, because you're the real queen of house hacking here. I'm just like a dabbler, right? Like you're a diving duck, I'm a dabbling duck. And so you're diving in, you're doing it, right? So maybe we should hear about, how did you even hear about house hacking? Like, it sounds like your grandpa didn't sit you down and say, hey kid, this is what you got to do. So how did this come on your radar?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we've all been there back in the college days and kind of house hacked in that form. I definitely did that. But I didn't think of that as a long-term strategy. But it's interesting. I think I have to throw that out there because it was like a method that I used at that point. And then there was another moment where I was, again, house hacking with like a business partner way back in the day. And she actually owned the house and she had one of those ADUs in the back, and that's where she lived. And then she kind of created another like ADU attached to that house, like in Southwest Florida. They're called like mother-in-law suites, and these they're kind of, I don't know, a lot of houses here have those. So she created like another dwelling unit, and that's where I stayed. So we kind of like did this house hacking. She rented out the larger portion of the house as a vacation home, and then she was in the mother-in-law suite, and then I was in this like another attachment. So to me, I was like, oh, I came out of college and then I went to that living situation. And then from there, I moved in with my sister in my early career stage. So then again, I found myself house hacking. So I want to say that I had this experience of living with other people and I felt comfortable with that. So I think that's why when true house hacking, that terminology came on my radar, I was like, oh, I'm kind of familiar with this. I think I could do this. So what's on my radar today? I've been house hacking for 4 years. And what me and my husband did, and my daughter was 1 year old at the time, we bought a duplex, that traditional, like I said, same way my grandfather was doing it, although he told me he was like house hacking after the fact that I already made this financial decision. But we bought a duplex, and then we lived in the one side as our primary residence, and then we rented out the other side. So I heard of that traditional kind of method through Bigger Pockets, just listening to an interview from someone else. And I think they actually have, plenty of interviews out there. There is like a house hacking book you can go and look on Bigger Pockets, and they kind of walk you through some of those methods. So I kind of just did that whole like, okay, what are they doing? Let me try to like copy what they're doing and see if it'll work for me. So bought the house, rented out the other side. So I never thought it was like kind of strange that I would be, living next to somebody as I kind of, I don't know, moved up and increased my housing experience. At the time I was living in an apartment. So I was like, well, I'm living next to somebody already. So why not live next to somebody, or at least only one other person instead of somebody on top and to the left and to the right? When you're living in an apartment and I had all those people living around me, I wasn't able to choose who that was. But now as a landlord, I was able to put a little bit more criteria in there. I mean, I'm not saying, as a landlord, you have to be like fair housing, et cetera, but you're able to put a lot more criteria into what kind of tenant you want. So I was able to kind of choose and be more selective of who was living next to me, especially, as a family with a daughter, et cetera. So when I made that move and I bought that duplex, their portion of the rent was going towards the mortgage, and I still had to pay a portion of it. But pretty much I cut our housing costs in half, like instantly, with making that decision. So I think a lot of people don't realize how house hacking and how the cost of housing affects their budget and their expenses. And as you've said before, Danielle, like housing is like the number one most expensive thing on everyone's expenses. So if you're able to find a way to cut that in half or even by a quarter or whatever through a house hacking method, like that is substantial amount of savings.
So you bought the first duplex, and I'm saying first because you have more than one.
Yeah.
You have 2 sets of duplexes. You have 4 units happening.
Mm-hmm. That's the gateway. Watch out, house hackers.
Right, you get one and now you need more, and even I hear you sometimes talk about getting another one. So I can see that perhaps it sets you on a course.
It does.
I think that other people, and even myself, like we'd want to know, like, what was that hard? Like I remember I just bought a home, right? Like in California, in a hot market, in a seller's market. I was looking at duplexes briefly, and it was extremely hard to get one here. What was your process? So you bought maybe the first one. How was that? How was buying a second one? Like, did you need a ton of money? Can someone do this if they, don't have a ton of money?
Yeah. So what's nice about doing house hacking and buying a house that you can do some kind of house hacking with, duplexes, like, the split floor plan is really nice, but there's other methods. But what's nice is that when you're buying that property, you're buying it as a primary residence. So that kind of opens you up to that primary mortgage options. So you can do FHA, you can probably do, if you are a veteran, you can use a VA loan. You can do like a very low down payment. I did an adjustable rate mortgage, red flag some people, but at the time it worked out for me. But I did the adjustable rate mortgage so I could put a low down payment with my mortgage lender at the time. So I only had to put down 10%, but I mean, if you're doing FHA, you only have to put 3.5% down, or VA, you only put like 0% down. So you can get into this, without having a lot of money down payment, because it's your primary residence. So that's like a really great benefit. Now buying a duplex, which is a dual home, that market is hot. Like investors, like real estate investors, are looking at those properties because they see them as a cash flowing rental income. So like you go out and you're like, oh, I'm new to this, and that was me. Like, let's go check out this duplex. I don't know anything about owning a home or being a landlord. And I'm walking in, and here comes, the shark investor. It's like, yes, this is perfect. I'll take it. I want 5, which is me today. I'm like, I don't need to see it. I'll take it. It's cash flowing. I'm ready. So now I've become the shark. But it is a hot market because the investors, they know these properties cash flow. And I think that's like a really like eye-opening, because us coming in, as a, you're just looking for a place to stay. But if you're coming into like a duplex, you're like, wow, like an investor thinks this is a good investment. Like, especially if you're new to investing, like you have that shark that comes in and says like, they're being taken out from under you because they're such great investments. So like for me, there's a lot of conversation out there. Is your house an investment? Is it not? For me, technically it is, because I mean, I'm living here in this duplex and I'm renting out the other side. But when I move out, it will turn into a rental and it'll be cash flowing, and it is an investment. It's a property that I can sell, and that has, it's appreciating asset. I don't have to sell in a down market. I'm at that like seller's point of view where I only sell when I know I'm going to make money.
Do you think living in Southwest Florida was helpful, just considering the housing prices there compared to other places? Or do you think it's changed now?
Well, I think compared to California, it's always going to be better, right?
Yeah.
Get out of California.
Too late.
I think in Southwest Florida, like I had a little bit of an advantage, but I think at the time, even for me, when I went to go and buy the duplex, this was in 2018. Of course, the market was different then, but at the time I was like, that's expensive. I think every day we look at the number, we say today's number is expensive, because guess what? Tomorrow's number is expensive. The next year is expensive. That you get, like if I bought in 2008 with the whole world melting into this financial crisis, this area was 50% vacant. Like there was houses that were abandoned. So of course, like if I bought in that time, but we were all in a financial, destitute, like majority of, the world was crippling at that time. So it's not like a lot of people had that opportunity to go and find something at that time. So I think I kind of made it like, let's do it. Let's try it. If it's the worst financial decision of our lives, well, let's get out of it quick. But it's been the opposite. Now, if you're in other markets, I think those other house hacking strategies could be very helpful. With being in California, I love that you said like, there's these houses that have this like split floor plan. So you have like, master's suite bedroom with a bathroom. You could probably wall that off, like create a wall, separate it from the rest of the house, and maybe turn that into a studio rental, turn it into an Airbnb, and then you've created a house hack.
Yeah. And I think I would encourage everyone to check your local town or city's ordinances and rules, right? Some places let you do that. Some places they call that a new construction, and they say that's only long-term rentals.
Yeah.
But get this. So if you're not a family of, with a bunch of kids, I know someone who's done this where they converted their garage. They went to go live in the garage.
Wow.
So the new construction was for them, and the existing home, which can be Airbnb'd out, is ready and would generate more income for them. So they go stay in the garage, which it was a 2-car garage, like 400 something square feet, just fine for a single person.
That's so cool. I would buy a duplex with a garage and turn the garage into my unit, and then I would then rent out both of the houses. That would be so cool. I mean, I have kids now, I can't do that, but I would encourage other, just coming out of college, you don't have kids, like, that's a great option.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing what you can do if you're a single person or a couple. I mean, the sky is the limit. Like you
Yeah.
can live pretty small,
Yeah.
in that constellation of a family, and you could do all sorts of stuff. You could put a tiny home in the yard and rent out your whole house, or split your house up, or rent rooms, right?
Mhm.
And generate even more income by doing room rentals as opposed to the entire place.
Yeah.
So there are just like so many ways for you to think creatively. And I think a lot of people from other countries and other cultures already have kind of been born into this way of thinking,
Yeah.
or come in as immigrants and already kind of think like, how am I going to lower this huge expense because I'm here either to establish myself or send money home, etc. And
Mhm.
so most of the people I know who have immigrated here are doing some kind of house hack, unless they have a
Mhm.
large family. They're
Yeah.
doing something. They're renting out rooms. They have like a duplex, or they have other rentals, renting out rooms, or Airbnb-ing out those units. So it's like, it's really kind of thinking outside the box. Like, okay, like you literally have this house, or you rent an apartment. Is
Yeah.
there anything, can you rent room? Like if you're
Mhm.
not a family, if you're a single person and you don't use the other rooms in your home, you could screen people. You could rent those rooms out, or you could rent them on Airbnb.
Yeah. Or what if you were like single parent and you like join up with another single parent, and now you've created this two moms that are single parenting, and you've got one child or two children. Like, I don't know, like you could probably create like a really nice dynamic and house hack that way and share your housing costs. Yeah, I think and if you were really in a situation and you do have a family, like this could be an option. You need to get yourself out of financial crisis, do this for a temporary time frame. House hacking, cut your housing costs in half and use that to get yourself out of financial crisis. um, Creativity really gets you to solutions.
I mean, even for us, so I'm not planning on house hacking in the traditional sense.
Mm.
However, my story started with, I was actually in Panama. I was with my husband, and we basically stayed in an Airbnb house hack, like on the water in this beautiful, beautiful town.
Wow.
And it like occurred to us, like, this home is tiny. We have like a 700 square foot condo. We could wall off some stuff and like do exactly what this person's doing. We lived in the Bay Area, and so we did. We got these little like room dividers, and we rented out. We bought a futon, and
Oh
we
my gosh.
rented a futon, and people paid. They paid, I forget how much, like $40 maybe for it. Okay. But
For the
if we got
futon?
people
To stay on the
for the
futon.
futon, to stay on the
Wow.
futon, and we didn't care. We both worked full time, and we didn't
Yeah.
have kids. So like, who cares? We even had a dog, and no one cared. Like, people
Wow.
needed the rental, they needed a place to stay in the Bay Area that was affordable, and
Mhm.
it met a need, and it worked out great. And the only thing that made us stop was, at some point, I learned about dog boarding, and I realized I could make that same amount of money and not have to actually work as hard, and,
Wow.
actually scale it more, because you could actually have more dogs, whereas you can only rent one futon. And so we dog boarded and made even more money
Oh
than
my
than
gosh.
renting out the futon.
House
And
hacking with
so,
dog boarding, right?
right, they're rented,
Yeah.
they're
That's so
they're
cool.
tenants,
Yeah.
okay? And now we've moved to a home with a yard. And originally, it's like, oh yeah, this isn't going to be a house hack. It's a single family home.
Mm.
I don't want to deal with remodeling or figuring out a way to get, Airbnb, and then the ordinances here say that you can't do new construction as an Airbnb.
Okay.
I'm bypassing all of that because my house hack is non-human.
Non-human.
It's dogs.
Oh my gosh.
It's dogs.
Yeah.
And there's other things too. Like, I'm not going to personally do this because I don't think it's probably necessary in my area.
Mhm.
But there's this company called Sniff Spot, where you rent out your yard for people to bring their dogs as like a dog park.
Oh my gosh.
You can also rent
Wow.
out your pool. You could rent out your pool for people hourly, and you can make, like, some of these pools are like $50 an hour.
That's
Okay,
so
for a
cool.
pool that maybe you're at work and you're not
Right.
even going to use your pool.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not just the rooms. It's not just this traditional even idea of like house hacking is having someone sleep in
Mm-hmm.
your house. It's like, yeah, but that could be an animal,
Right. Yeah.
or that could be your pool. They're just renting your pool for a bit, or they're going out to just sniff your grass and
Mm-hmm.
run around on it and leave.
Nice. Yeah.
So
I
you can
think,
turn this, this liability into an asset.
right. I love that. Yeah. Because a lot of people are like, oh, well, I can't do that. But I mean, not with people, but you could totally do that with dogs. Unless you like have an allergy and then you got to go back to the house hacking. um,
Yeah.
I know like people have they have converted basements. I mean in my area I don't have that. Like all of Florida is like sinking, so we don't have any basements. So
Cool.
but I mean that's a popular house hacking method. A lot of Airbnbs you might find like, oh okay, the basement is rented, is for rent. In New York, it's not uncommon to be doing like this house hacking, renting out the rooms. It's like, or renting out your couch. Like it sounds uncommon when you're not in those areas, but when you start looking, I bet you go and look on Airbnb, it says couch for rent, right?
They
And
call
you
it
know
a
what?
shared room or whatever.
Shared room. And I
Yeah.
think, let's say you're in an area, like, again, I can't do this in my area, but if I went one city over, I could. I'd go and buy like one of those really cute, like Airstreams, like, some kind of like fixer up, retro RV kind of things. And I could put that if I had a yard and I could rent that out. And that would be a house hacking strategy. Anything that is helping you reduce your housing and using your housing space helps you is a house hacking strategy. So I think that some of those ideas are not in those house hacking books and blog posts. I don't think I've heard dog boarding at all in any of them.
It may not meet the criteria, I don't know, but
Yeah.
it's what I plan on doing, and
Mm-hmm.
it could potentially cover my entire mortgage if I
Yeah.
was on top of it and really marketed and everything. That could
Yeah.
cover my mortgage, and I could essentially be living here for free, but dealing with no humans sleeping anywhere,
Right.
only dogs, and small dogs at that.
Yeah. And so another two ideas, I mean, if you have like a little bit of space for the RV kind of thing, then you have space for people to come and tent. Like there's like websites where you can rent your land space and do and go camping. So
Mhm.
I mean, I think that works out really well when you have like some kind of like if you have a farm or some kind of experience, maybe you're near a spring or something, and maybe you're near like a very popular camping ground and it's always booked. There's an area in Florida that's like nonstop, that's always booked. So it's like if I were to live like near that, I could be like, oh, I'm 15 minutes from that very popular camping ground, and you could still kind of like have that same experience because there's natural springs here, and that's what draws a lot of people.
There are so many ideas. I mean, even just you talking about the RV. Now you can rent your RV in the sense of people taking it,
Mm,
right? You can rent it out and they can go drive it around and bring it back to you. And so that's one way if you
nice.
wanted like to have an RV to like fund it basically and maybe even have your ownership costs be relatively low.
Mm,
Another thing that's come up, especially during the pandemic, is that people will rent out rooms in their home for work at home, people who don't have an office in their home.
huh.
So that's a
But
really
they
cool
and they
one.
still don't want to go to the office.
Right.
Or
Yeah. Like,
maybe
let's
there is
say,
no office, I guess.
well, okay. Yeah. Like me, there is no office.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I was
Huh.
living in a 1 bedroom condo, I was tired of it. And I had fantasies of like, if my neighbor could just like let me go and use their house
Oh my
to get away
gosh.
from my children so that I could
Cool.
have silence. And you know what? There's a lot of people in that situation. So you
Yeah.
could rent out a room, per day or whatever it is. Kind of how people, in my line of work, we sublet office days because you
Mm.
rent an office, it's in your name, and then you sublet out the days that you don't need. So it's a form of like
Mm.
office hacking, but this would
Okay.
be in your home
Right.
because it would be probably a lot cheaper than getting a formal lease in an office building, have to deal with like, signing a year lease,
Mm-hmm.
etc.
Yeah.
Um, so that is something you could potentially do. I've also heard of people, and this isn't really house hacking your own house, but people buy raw land and turn it into dog parks. I was just remembering that because of like the sniff spot. Like you can kind of like, or if you have a ton of land, you could section off a part of it and make it a formal dog park with an entrance fee.
Nice. Yeah, because let's say, oh, I've always wanted to, buy land and build my house, but I don't have it's not in my financial timeline to do it right now, but I'll go buy the land because I can get it cheap, and then you could turn it into that, so you're kind of like offsetting that cost. That's cool.
Yeah, or flipping it technically. I mean, you could flip it into a dog park and I guess you could sell it.
Oh, now you're
really
creating a business and selling a business. We
Yeah.
started with house hacking. That's what house hacking is. I think the biggest thing for me when so I didn't want to, I didn't want to own a home like to begin with, because it was like, oh, there's all those things. I mean, I got an adult and I got to take care of stuff, and let alone like own, manage another property, like another whole house, and like take care of those people. I didn't know what being a landlord was like. And I'm just trying to get information online and hope for the best, and thinking like we're going to fail at this like dramatically. But it turned out working out so well that, we ended up buying another duplex, and that was 6 months later. Like I went from 0, 10 plus years saying, I don't want to own a house, I don't want to be a landlord. And then when I bought my first duplex, within 6 months, I'm like, we have to buy another one. And if I didn't I could have kept going, but then 2020 happened. And I was like, okay, well, let's reserve, and we don't know what the world's going to be like, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's what happens. You hear people who are in real estate, and you're like, gosh, they like realtor, the real estate investors, and they have one unit and they're like, oh, I have 50 doors now. It's because there's something about it. Once you start getting that rent check, you're like, oh, this actually works out pretty well. Like, this feels really good. I like doing this. Like, I like earning money and just like renting a house. So I think like that was like a surprising, I don't know, something that I didn't even expect to come out of it. I went into it just thinking, oh, I'm going to reduce my housing costs, but then other things came out of it, like, hey, I can, this can be an investment. Let's keep going. Let's see what this feels like. We started renting as an annual tenant, but now all my rentals are Airbnb now, because it earns more income. But I didn't go into that. Like, I didn't go into that short, like renting and thinking I'll do short-term rentals, it's a different aspect of that real estate. And it's a different aspect of real estate. Like, going into short-term rentals is you're accommodating people. You are in this, what is it? What industry is that considered? You're in the hospitality, and I should know that. You're in the hospitality industry. So it's a little different. I mean, but you play around with like what you feel, and of course these are people, but if you go into the dog boarding, then I guess that's hospitality too, right?
Canine hospitality.
Canine hospitality.
What do you have to say to the people that say the interest rate on average is 6.89? That there's all this uncertainty, that 8 out of 10 people say it's not a good time to buy, but they don't own something right now, and they want to, or they're listening to you and they're going like, that sounds great, I want to do something like that. Is this the wrong time for them to do that?
I don't, let's say yes and no, because it's the wrong time if you're not in the right financial situation to do it. Like, you shouldn't go and, put a bunch of money down on a property, go buy a place, and you don't have any, money for the reserves, as they say, like, in case things break. If you're not mentally ready to be a landlord, I mean, I wasn't, but I was like, there's, sometimes you're like, let's just, pull the Band-Aid off and let's go for it. So I feel like some of those things you need to, make sure you're making the right decision for the right reason. If you were to think about it separately and just for like, oh, the economy and the interest rates and all this stuff, I have a friend who's a mortgage broker, and he's like, date the interest rate, right? And then, but marry the house. So you can always refinance into a lower interest rate. I bought my first place with an adjustable rate mortgage, and that was actually, it was a pretty good interest rate. But I refinanced out of it into an even better interest rate when, things were crazy. So, I mean, we don't know what the future is gonna be like, but that could still be an option on the table. Now, I've been running numbers because I'm like, hey, maybe I'll buy another duplex. Does it make sense? And it's like, okay, well, maybe year one isn't the best year. Year two, hey, you know what? It's looking kind of okay. Year three, like, wait a minute, this is sounding like this was a great idea. Now, if you start looking over like a long term, like 5 years, I think you should think of it that way. If you're saving money, making money over that like 5-year term, then it's a good idea.
So essentially, they should ignore a lot of the noise, the general fear-based kind of news that's very intention grabbing. On one hand, you're hearing 8 out of 10 say it's a bad time to buy a house. The other side is saying the inventory is low because people have these super great interest rates and they don't want to sell. So it's like, who knows what to believe? What really matters is what's your personal financial position?
Yeah.
What makes sense for you? What do you want for the next 5-10 years? Do you want an income producing property? Are you willing to and have the capacity to, financial capacity and psychological, to weather the first year or two of kind of not potentially making a profit, knowing that down the line you're going to see the fruits of that labor, but it's, maybe not as fast as if you bought it at a 2% interest rate, 50% less expensive, which, let's be honest, we may never see any of that again. We may not see those interest rates again, and we may not see house prices really come down very much. We don't know what the future is going to be like. So it's like, what matters is, what are you going to do right now?
Yeah, you know what I think is interesting? When I go, like, let's talk about the duplex, and that we're talking about house hacking. So not necessarily, is it a good time to buy a primary residence? But is it a good time to buy like a house hack? I find it interesting that the people that like duplexes don't come on the market very often because they are cash flowing. And guess what? The people that bought those, not all of them bought it during the 2% interest rate time. They bought it years ago. Look at the owners. They had an interest rate, probably, I don't know, 17%. They bought it in the 70s, the 80s, whatever. Like, their interest rate is probably very different. They're probably already paid off at that time. Sure, maybe like, well, the house was like $100, $100, whatever.
Yeah.
When I look at the prices, I'm like, wow, they bought it that much, like back in the day. But yeah, guess what? The rents were less too. Like, everything was less. Nobody had the amount of cash in their pocket then as they do now. Like, everything goes up together.
It's all relative. They were making less money.
Yeah,
hopefully now we're making more money, although it has salaries have not really kept up with.
I know, that's why I'm jumbling on my words, but still, I mean, there's some kind of relative to it.
Yeah.
But so I feel like if you're thinking about going into like house hacking and you want to go out there and go look for a duplex, if you see something come on the market and you see it go off the market and it's sold within, I don't know, a couple days, I want you to just go and check, like, just get the feel, go on Zillow and be like, oh, that one looks kind of good. Guess what? In a couple days, it's going to be sold because investors still see it as a good investment. So I think that's like very telling, like the fact that I'm looking at stuff and I'm like, oh, it's 6.8%, but within a couple years, because that's the way investors look like. I mean, some of them are wanting to flip quickly, but that's a different property. And we're not talking about that. Like, when you're looking at, I mean, we're talking about house hacking, but you're still buying a real estate property that's investing. And maybe you don't live in that property forever, but maybe you do, like my grandfather. But it's like, over the long term, you run the numbers, you look at your numbers, and you're going to find that it's going to be better for your financial picture.
Yeah, it's like, just because it's not as good of a deal as the 2% perhaps was, doesn't mean it's not going to turn a profit for you and be a good investment.
Yeah. Yep. And at this point in time, I'm 4 years into my house hacking journey of a strategy. I don't pay the mortgage. Like, I pay zero. My Airbnb rental pays the mortgage plus its expenses plus its utility bills, because you got to pay for that. And I get cash in my pocket. Like, if I thought back in the day, even though the interest rates were lower in 2018, but I was like, oh, I have to put this much money down. Like it's all like single-minded. I was only thinking of that day. If I had said, you know what, within 4 or 5 years, you're going to be making, and I make like, I don't know, I have to look at the numbers again, but it's like $1,500 a month, like cash in my pocket after all said and done. That's net profit, $1,500. Like if I had run those numbers 4 years ago, I would have been like, oh hell yes, sign me up now. Like how many house hacks can I do? Can I like live in one and can my husband live in the other one? Like, so you know, run those numbers, look at it like from a longer time frame and see if it works out for you. You know, and if you don't want to buy, like do dog boarding. Pitch a tent and rent that out. People have like teepees and all sorts of fun stuff like that.
And you don't need to be a homeowner. A lot of times you can figure out how to rent something, or where you're currently renting, you can talk to the owner and potentially still Airbnb out parts of your home.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have minded if my tenants wanted to Airbnb a unit, like one of their bedrooms or something. I've been like, well, you're responsible for XYZ, sign right here, you know, do your thing. Like, hey, I'm a landlord, I have units, and other landlords will be that way too. So check it out. If you have enjoyed the show, please share with another Scrunchy Mama and hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. For show notes, resources, and links to our other video shorts, check out our website, scrunchify.com.